For the Investing News Network. I'm Brian McGovern. Today, we will be discussing the role of mergers and acquisitions, or M&A, in the Canadian cannabis industry. With me today to do so is Monica Chadha, National Cannabis Leader for EY Canada. Monica, thank you so much for joining me.
My pleasure, Brian. Thank you for having me.
Now, Monica, before we begin, I'm wondering if you could provide me a bit of a breakdown of how your day-to-day work relates to the cannabis industry, specifically on the M&A side of things, and sort of how you evaluate the space.
For sure. I mean, some of what we do is actually help not only license holders, but those within the adjacent sectors actually enter into the industry. So we help them with their market entry strategy. And in a lot of cases, particularly with the adjacent sector, it's who they should potentially form a union with. So really evaluating some of the softer aspects of cultural fit, strategic direction, market presence are some of the factors that we would consider in conjunction with obviously financials. So we definitely help with market entry strategy. We do help with due diligence aspects. A major sort of theme that's coming out recently is post-integration synergies that can be had. So helping from that perspective as well, but really helping on the full spectrum of the transaction is what we've been doing, sort of in the recent past.
Why don't we start with the big picture? First of all, how would you categorize the state of M&A for the Canadian cannabis industry at this moment?
Yeah, I think there are several permutations of transaction activity we'll be seeing over the next year or two. Capital investments by foreign investors and companies in the adjacent sector will be on the rise as the prospect of US federal legalization becomes more tangible and other jurisdictions start to open up. I think we can anticipate seeing unique partnerships or joint ventures with Canadian companies. I think the flavor of the year and maybe next year will be consolidation. And I think companies that are not fortunate enough to raise or strategically deploy capital will likely see more closures.
I see. You're getting a bit ahead of me because I was going to ask you exactly if consolidation you feel like is playing a big role into the way that M&A strategies moving forward. We've heard from a long time from financial experts and people within the industry as well that as the industry kept growing and growing, there was just not that much space for that many operators, for that many public companies. At this point, do you get a sense that more and more of the industry is starting to evaluate where maybe they can join together to, instead of growth, just to kind of like join forces and strengthen positions?
Yeah, I think the Canadian cannabis marketplace will eventually turn into an oligopoly. We're already seeing the initial signs of this migration. Bigger players potentially forming unions, smaller players reevaluating their capabilities and pairing themselves with one or more other licensed producers whose business models complement each other. So I do see that we can anticipate to see more of this activity in the coming year or years.
Of course, of course. You mentioned the United States, and that obviously is becoming a bit of the most important aspect overall, and a lot of the strategies that we're hearing more and more about from even the Canadians as well. Can you maybe offer a breakdown on how exactly M&A can play a role into the way that the Canadians can actually get a head start into the U.S. marketplace? Obviously, pending major kind of legalization changes down there.
Yeah, for sure. I think, as I mentioned at the top of this interview, that the rise of foreign investment is happening. We certainly see the adjacent sectors seeing a renewed interest in these Canadian companies, and largely due to the possibility of expansion opportunities into not only the U.S. but other legal jurisdictions. What you can also anticipate is that Canadian companies will form strategic partnerships with established US companies or brands who already have the infrastructure, the distribution channels, the brand recognition, the retail presence in the US that can potentially be leveraged for cannabis purposes.
Yeah. There's definitely a growing amount of interest, and I am very curious about how exactly the breakdown from the major players into some of the smaller scale companies will affect that entry point into the U.S. We've already seen some companies affect that market in one capacity or another as much as possible. But so, do you have a sense for maybe the type of strategies that could fall within the M&A? Obviously, there has to be synergy, there has to be compatibility between the two companies or more. What sort of plays into making the right kind of deal for any company in the space?
There are several elements that play into this analysis. For some, and again, it really depends on the size, scale, scope of the organization and the level of maturity. For some, it is the market entry footprint or the globalization strategy that a particular target, or if they're a targetee, has. In other cases, it's the production capabilities and the ability to scale as required. We've seen elements of capitalizing on the infrastructure and distribution channels of, some potential targets. So many different factors that come into play, very different for all players. There's no one size fits all in terms of what they're looking for. But certainly, certainly various permutations that come into play.
Now, as the last thing, Monica, I'm wondering if you could tell us a bit more if you expect to see a spark in M&A activity for the cannabis sector, based on the fact that we've seen some recent blockbuster deals take over.
I think we can anticipate to see the rise of deals or transactions, again, varying permutations of what these transactions look like. But absolutely, we're at a point of inflection in the industry where the stronger players need to emerge or start emerging if they feel that they're catapulting themselves, towards being a top tier producer or company. So in order to do that, in some cases, there is the need to find the right unique unions, partnerships, JVs, acquisitions, and I think we can expect and anticipate to see, different forms happening, and quite frankly, not necessarily between licensed producers themselves, but you will see companies in the adjacent sectors such as CPG, retail, pharmaceutical, tobacco we've already seen. That list goes on, but you'll likely see them entering this space and doing so in forming these unique sort of transactions.
Perfect. We'll have to wait and see how it all plays out. Monica, thank you so much for your time and your expertise.
Thank you very much.
Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our YouTube channel for even more interviews with experts. For the Investing News Network, I am Brian McGovern, and we'll see you next time.